I've always known my life to be predictable, a quiet home with familiar routines and the steady presence of my stepfather, Albert. For as long as I can remember, Albert has been a reserved, dependable figure in our household. He usually spent his evenings tinkering in the garage or quietly watching television. His calm, steady way helped keep everything in order. Lately, though, I've started to notice a change, a subtle shift in the way he acts that makes me both curious and uneasy. It began on an ordinary afternoon. With my mom away on one of her frequent work trips, I returned from school expecting the usual silence. Instead, I found Albert in the kitchen. He was wearing an apron and preparing dinner with a focus I hadn't seen before. The scent of freshly chopped vegetables filled the air, and for a moment, I couldn't help but feel a strange warmth at the sight of him so intent on doing something new. "Hi, Jessica," Albert greeted me with a gentle smile that felt different, almost tentative. "I thought I'd try my hand at dinner tonight. I hope you don't mind." I was startled by the unexpected change in his behavior. "Sure," I managed to reply, still processing what I'd just seen. Dinner passed quietly, yet as we sat together at the table, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more behind his kind words than just a simple attempt to be helpful. He mentioned my school projects and my growing independence, but there was an intensity in his tone that left me wondering if I was misinterpreting his concern. Over the next few days, the atmosphere at home grew increasingly charged. I began to notice that Albert's behavior wasn't just about cooking or small talk. It was the way he looked at me, the lingering in his voice, and the timing of his every gesture. Every morning, when I crossed the hallway, he greeted me with an unusually warm "Good morning, Jessica. Did you sleep well?" His words, though meant to be caring, made my heart race with a mix of gratitude and discomfort. At first, I tried to convince myself that he was simply trying to fill the gap left by my mom's absence, that his attention was nothing more than extra support. But as the days went by, the pattern became clear. Each interaction, no matter how small, carried an emotional charge I couldn't ignore. I started to feel like every kind word or compliment was loaded with a meaning I couldn't decipher. One evening, while I was alone in my room struggling to concentrate on my homework, there was a soft knock on my door. My heart pounded as I slowly opened it, and there stood Albert, his expression gentle but determined. "May I come in?" he asked quietly, his voice calm in a way that made my pulse quicken. I hesitated, then stepped aside to let him in. He sat on the edge of my bed, not too near, yet close enough that I felt the weight of his presence. "I've been thinking," he began, "about how much you remind me of someone I once was, so independent, so focused, and with a spark that could light up even the darkest days." His words were meant as a compliment, but all I could feel was a mix of admiration and uncertainty. The comparison, though flattering, made me wonder if I was being seen through eyes that expected something more than just a daughter's love. Thank you," I whispered, unsure if I was overreacting or if my feelings were valid. I've always looked up to Albert for his stability, but right then, the line between genuine care and something else felt disturbingly blurred. After a long pause, he added, "You can always talk to me, Jessica. If you ever feel overwhelmed or need someone to listen, I'm here for you." With that, he stood up and quietly left my room, leaving me alone with my swirling thoughts. In the following days, our household routine continued as usual, but every interaction now felt charged with a hidden intensity. I started to notice how every small gesture from Albert, every lingering look or seemingly casual comment, was different from before. It was as if our relationship was slowly shifting into unfamiliar territory. The warm greetings in the morning, the thoughtful observations at dinner, even the quiet moments when I felt his eyes on me, they all added up to something I couldn't quite name. I found myself spending long moments alone in my room, trying to make sense of these changes. My mind was filled with conflicting thoughts. On one hand, I was grateful for his extra attention during my mom's absence. On the other, I couldn't ignore the growing discomfort at the intimacy of our interactions. I even started keeping a journal, noting every unusual moment, a compliment here, a subtle shift in his tone there, in an effort to understand what was happening. At school, I tried to focus on my studies, but the images of our home kept intruding on my thoughts. I replayed in my mind the way Albert had looked at me during our quiet moments together, the slight changes in his voice that made it seem as though he was expecting more from our conversations. The more I thought about it, the more I began to question whether I was simply overanalyzing or if something fundamental had indeed changed in our relationship. One particularly reflective evening, I sat by my window watching the sunset. The golden hues bathed the familiar streets in soft light, yet inside, I felt a deep unrest. The beauty of the evening only intensified the internal conflict I was experiencing. I wondered whether these changes were just temporary adjustments while my mom was away, or if they signaled a deeper, permanent shift. The uncertainty was unsettling. I longed for the simple, predictable home I once knew. As the light faded, I realized that I was standing at a crossroads. The comfort and safety I had always associated with my home were being replaced by a series of unspoken questions and subtle, disconcerting signals. Every day brought a new moment of confusion, a new instance where the boundary between care and something else seemed to fade away. I felt the need to reach out for guidance, maybe talk to a teacher or a close friend, yet the fear of disrupting the fragile balance at home kept me silent. Now, as I write these thoughts down in my journal, I'm left with more questions than answers. The familiar warmth of my home has given way to an emotional tension that I can neither fully embrace nor easily dismiss. I know that something fundamental has changed, and I am not sure how to reclaim the sense of normalcy I once had. Each kind word and every extra moment of attention from Albert seems to pull me deeper into a situation I never anticipated. I stand here, uncertain about the future, and I can't help but wonder how things will unfold. Will I find the clarity I need to navigate these shifting dynamics, or will I continue to feel trapped in a growing storm of conflicting emotions? For now, I can only keep writing, hoping that by putting my thoughts into words, I'll eventually understand what has become of the home I once knew so well. As I close this chapter of my reflections, I know that the path ahead will be filled with difficult questions and tough decisions. I'm left with the realization that nothing is quite as it once was, and I must find a way to understand and adapt to this new reality. I can only hope that in time, I'll learn how to reclaim the balance between trust and personal space that I so desperately need. In the days after that unsettling evening, I found myself drifting through each day in a daze. The once familiar rhythms of home life now felt oddly disjointed. I kept replaying every interaction with Albert in my mind, wondering if my thoughts were simply overactive or if something had truly shifted. Every kind word and every extra moment of attention seemed to carry a hidden message I couldn't decipher. I started to withdraw into myself. At school, my mind would wander during class, revisiting those quiet moments when Albert's gaze lingered a little too long. I tried to focus on my studies, but the constant internal replay of our conversations and gestures left me distracted and anxious. I began to document my thoughts in a journal, hoping that by writing down my feelings, I might untangle the web of confusion that had settled over me. One afternoon, while sitting under the shade of an old oak tree on campus, I decided to share some of these feelings with my closest friend, Emily. Over a cup of tea in the quiet corner of a campus CAF, I hesitated before broaching the subject. "Emily, I've been feeling off lately," I confessed. "It's like everything at home isn't as simple as it used to be." Emily listened intently, her eyes kind and understanding. "What do you mean, Jessica?" she asked softly. I explained the changes I'd observed, how Albert's behavior seemed different, the thoughtful compliments, and the way he insisted on being so close during our conversations. I described the mixed feelings of warmth and unease that washed over me whenever he spoke in that particular tone. Emily reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "It sounds like you're in a really confusing place right now," she said. "I know it might be hard to process, but maybe it would help to talk to someone who could offer a more objective perspective. Have you thought about speaking with a school counselor?" I paused, considering her suggestion. The idea of opening up to a professional both scared and intrigued me. On one hand, I wanted to understand what was happening. On the other, I worried about upsetting the delicate balance at home. "Maybe I will," I admitted. "I just don't know if I'm ready yet." Over the next several days, my internal struggle grew. At home, the subtle shifts in Albert's demeanor continued. Mornings were filled with gentle greetings that felt almost rehearsed. Evenings brought moments when I would catch him watching me with an intensity that left me feeling both seen and exposed. I tried to reassure myself that his behavior was just a new way of coping with my mom's absence, a misguided attempt to fill a gap. But deep down, I sensed that something more complicated was unfolding. One evening after dinner, I found myself alone in the living room, the quiet humming of the refrigerator the only sound in the house. I sat curled up on the couch, turning over the events of the day in my mind. My thoughts were interrupted by the soft sound of footsteps. I looked up to see Albert approaching, a hesitant expression on his face. "Jessica," he began, his voice unusually gentle, "I wanted to check in with you. I can tell you've been a bit distant lately. Is everything okay?" His concern was sincere, and for a moment, I almost let down my guard. But then I remembered the conflicted feelings swirling within me. I managed a weak smile. "I'm fine, Albert. Just a lot on my mind, I guess." He hesitated before replying. "If you ever need to talk, you know where to find me." His words, though meant to reassure, only deepened my internal conflict. I wondered if I should confide in him, share the questions that plagued my thoughts, but fear and uncertainty held me back. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't sleep. My mind replayed his words and my own silent responses, each moment adding to the layers of doubt I felt about our relationship. I questioned whether I was overreacting or if my intuition was warning me of something I couldn't quite articulate. In the stillness of the night, I resolved to pay closer attention to both my feelings and his actions. As the days turned into a week, the tension between us seemed to crystallize into an unspoken distance. Albert maintained his gentle manner, but there was a noticeable shift, a carefulness in his movements, and a slight hesitancy in his tone. I began to wonder if he, too, was wrestling with these changes. Was he aware of the growing uncertainty? Did he regret the way our interactions had evolved? One late afternoon, after returning from a particularly challenging day at school, I found myself staring out the window, lost in thought. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the familiar landscape of our neighborhood, yet everything felt altered, as if the light itself couldn't penetrate the confusion that now shrouded my home. The quiet was broken by the soft sound of a knock at my door. I wasn't expecting anyone, and my heart fluttered with nervous anticipation. I opened the door to find Albert standing there, his eyes searching mine with an intensity that made me pause. "Jessica," he said carefully, "I've noticed you've been distant lately. I don't want to intrude, but I'm really concerned about you. If there's anything you need to talk about, anything at all, I'm here." His earnest tone made me hesitate. The mixture of care and the lingering uncertainty in his gaze left me feeling vulnerable. "I appreciate that, Albert," I said slowly, "but sometimes I just need some space to figure things out on my own." He nodded, understanding yet visibly disappointed. "Of course," he replied, "I just hope you know that you're not alone." With that, he turned and left, closing the door behind him. I stood there for a moment, the silence echoing around me. I knew that this situation was growing more complex by the day, and I wasn't sure how to navigate the tangled emotions inside me. In the solitude of my room, I began to write again in my journal. I detailed the uncertainty I felt, not just about Albert's actions, but about my own feelings. Was I misinterpreting his concern, or was there a deeper change in our dynamic that I needed to address? I poured out my confusion and fear, my longing for the stability of the past mixing with the dread of what the future might hold. That night, sleep eluded me as I wrestled with these thoughts. The boundaries between care and overstepping had blurred so thoroughly that I no longer knew where one ended and the other began. I wondered if the home I had always known was slipping away, replaced by something unrecognizable and unsettling. In the midst of my inner turmoil, a single thought kept repeating. I needed to understand what was happening, both for my own peace of mind and to protect the balance of our family. I resolved to seek help. The next day, I finally made an appointment with the school counselor, hoping that an outside perspective might offer me some clarity. Though the decision scared me, it felt like a necessary step towards reclaiming control over my life. As I walked down the hall to meet with the counselor, my heart pounded with a mix of anxiety and determination. I wasn't sure what the session would reveal, but I knew that I couldn't continue to live in this state of constant uncertainty. I needed answers, if not from Albert, then from someone who could help me process everything that had been unfolding. Now, as I prepare for the counseling session, I feel a glimmer of hope. Perhaps through honest conversation and guidance, I'll be able to untangle these complicated emotions and find a way back to the sense of safety and clarity I once knew. For now, I stand at the crossroads of confusion and resolution, determined to face the questions that have haunted me these past days. I don't know what tomorrow will bring or how these shifting dynamics will ultimately redefine my world, but I'm ready to take the first step toward understanding, and maybe, just maybe, reclaiming the home I once trusted. After weeks of overwhelming confusion, I finally mustered the courage to meet with the school counselor. That day, as I walked down the quiet hall, my heart pounded with a blend of anxiety and hope. I wasn't entirely sure what I was expecting, only that I needed clarity, a way to understand the complex emotions that had turned my once predictable home into a maze of mixed signals. The counselor's office was a calm retreat from the turbulent thoughts swirling in my mind. Soft light filtered through the window, and the room was decorated in soothing hues. I hesitated for a moment before taking a seat, trying to steady the storm of thoughts inside me. The counselor, Ms. Parker, greeted me with a warm smile and a gentle, "How are you feeling today?" which felt both comforting and inviting. I began to share my experiences, describing in careful detail the subtle shifts I had noticed in Albert's behavior over the past few weeks. I talked about the extra attention, the unusually personal compliments, and the moments when his words and gestures seemed to cross a line I couldn't clearly define. As I spoke, I felt a mix of relief and apprehension, relief in finally voicing my concerns, and apprehension over what these feelings might truly mean. Ms. Parker listened intently, nodding in understanding. "It sounds like you're experiencing a lot of internal conflict," she observed softly. "It's important to trust your feelings, Jessica. When something feels off, even if it isn't overtly harmful, it's worth exploring further." Her words resonated with me. I had been trying to rationalize Albert's behavior as nothing more than concern during your mom's absence, yet the persistent uncertainty and emotional strain suggested that something deeper was at play. We discussed the importance of setting boundaries, both for my own well-being and to maintain a healthy family dynamic. Ms. Parker gently encouraged me to reflect on what made me feel safe and what aspects of the interactions with Albert left me feeling uncomfortable. "Your feelings are valid," she reassured me. "It's okay to seek a balance where you can feel supported without feeling overwhelmed or confused about the nature of that support." As the session continued, I began to see that understanding my own emotions was the first step toward regaining control over the situation. I realized that I had been caught between appreciating the care shown in moments of loneliness and feeling unsettled by the intensity of that care. It was a delicate balance, one that I was now prepared to navigate with the help of guidance from someone who wasn't directly involved in the family dynamics. Before the session ended, Ms. Parker suggested some practical steps, writing down my feelings daily, noting specific interactions that troubled or comforted me, and perhaps even discussing these feelings with a trusted teacher or friend if I ever felt too burdened to handle them alone. I left her office with a notebook in hand and a cautious sense of hope, a small, yet significant step towards understanding the shifting nature of my home life. Walking back through the corridors of the school, I felt the weight of uncertainty still pressing on me, but also a budding sense of empowerment. I realized that seeking help wasn't a sign of weakness, but a necessary step in reclaiming my sense of safety and clarity. While I knew that the changes at home wouldn't resolve overnight, I was determined to keep track of my feelings and trust my instincts. Now, as I sit here writing in my journal later that evening, I feel a subtle shift within myself. I am beginning to recognize that I have the right to question, to set boundaries, and to seek answers, even when it means facing difficult truths. The journey ahead remains uncertain, but with each passing day, I hope to transform my confusion into clarity and my anxiety into strength. Stay tuned for part 4, where I continue this journey toward understanding and learn how to balance the tender care of family with the boundaries I need to feel safe and respected. In the weeks following my honest conversation with Albert, I slowly began to reclaim my sense of safety and balance at home. Expressing my feelings and setting clear boundaries proved empowering. Each morning, when I greeted him with a calm good morning, I felt more confident in my own voice. Our interactions, once clouded by uncertainty, gradually transformed into simpler, more respectful exchanges. I noticed small, positive changes. Albert listened more, assumed less, and gave me the space I needed to grow. The gentle, honest conversations we eventually shared helped rebuild trust, while my nightly journal entries became a source of solace and clarity. I learned that healing takes time, and that every effort to communicate openly strengthens the bonds that matter. Now, I move forward with a renewed sense of self, knowing my voice counts and that I deserve a home where I truly feel secure. Though the journey was challenging, I discovered that courage lies in speaking up and nurturing honest relationships. By reclaiming my space, I have reclaimed my future, one step at a time.